I know Commissioner Wadi is on her way. There was an issue on the BART tracks, Transbay tube, but she got through and she's on her way.
Oh, here she is.
There she is.
Let's see, do the roll. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started with this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, November 29th, 2023, a regular meeting. Actually, it's not a regular meeting, it's a special meeting. And I'd start with the call to order, and I'll follow that with the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. And now you do the roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Hudson. Here. Commissioner Momin.
Here.
Commissioner Wadi.
Here.
Vice Chair McLeod.
Here.
And Chair Pilch is not here, present.
Yeah, well, as soon as Chair Pilch arrives, he can take over chairing the meeting. Until then, we'll just get started. Item number 3, ex parte communications. Has any member received any? Seeing none. Myself, neither. We'll move on to item 4, consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion unless either a commissioner or a member of the public requests removal from the consent calendar. Do any commissioners wish to remove any items from the consent calendar?
Not to remove an item, but I need to recuse myself from item 4-2.
4-2?
So if we can just call the other items separately, that would be great.
Okay.
And I will abstain from item 4-1.
Okay. Well, why don't we just take them one at a time? Does any member of the public wish to remove any of these items?
If anyone participating virtually would like to remove an item from the consent calendar, please use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. We do have one person. Gillard, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't understand the bylaws and don't know what it means to remove. I just want to ask a question about 4.3.
I'm sorry, about the what? Can you
About item 4.3, this is application 23044.
Oh, yes. Why don't you ask your question and we can see if we can.
Sure. So the Planning Zoning Commission report states that the setback, the rear setback is 10 feet, and therefore the proposed expansion is within the requirement. It actually isn't. It is 20 feet, and the expansion is not within that setback. Can you tell me more about the reasoning to approve this?
Yes, thank you. Very good. And as I was putting together a PowerPoint for this tonight, there is an error in the staff report, a typo actually, that says in this, the development standards table that the rear setback is 10 feet. The required setback, when it's not, it's 20. However, this project has currently a non-conforming setback of 17 feet, I think 6 inches. And they are applying for a use permit to extend that non-conformity to the second floor, which is permissible under the zoning ordinance. So the application for 919 Ventura includes the design review for an addition over 400 square feet, as well as a second-story addition, as well as a use permit application for an extension of a non-conforming setback. And it's an existing non-conforming setback, again, to be clear, that will extend it vertically to the second story. And part of the second story already has that non-conforming setback, so it's actually doing it horizontally and vertically. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. Well, since we're not discussing that, we probably shouldn't say anything about it. But I did understand that it was, yeah, just continuing the existing setback. I did get that from
Correct.
looking at the materials, so.
But the caller is, or
Yeah,
the
okay.
participant is
Made a
correct.
good
That was a
point.
typo in the
Yeah,
staff report.
okay, fair enough. Okay, so we don't have any requests to remove any of these items from the consent calendar. So why don't we vote on them one by one? Or why don't we, can someone make a motion? We could take item 4.4-2 separately.
Why don't we just take them separately? So
Okay,
I'll
one
make
by
a
one.
motion to move item 4-1, the meeting minutes of October 5th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's take the vote. Commissioner Wadi,
Aye.
Commissioner Moman,
Abstain.
abstain, Commissioner Hudson,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Next item 4-2, do we have a motion?
A motion for approval.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Wadi will recuse herself, so Commissioner Moman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes also. Item 4-3,
Make a motion to approve item 4-3, 919 Ventura Avenue.
Second.
second, thank you. We'll vote Commissioner Hudson,
Aye.
Commissioner Moman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadi,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. So all those measures pass. I don't know if there are story polls up for any of these projects, but they do remain up for the appeal period.
Yes. So I know the applicant team is participating virtually, so just to make sure that those, if you heard that the story polls should remain up for the duration of
And it's
the
14 days,
appeal period. Yes, 14 days.
14-day appeal period.
Congratulations.
Okay, item 5, announcements, communications, discussion. Staff, do you have any announcements? Discuss these items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any?
We do. We have two people first in the chambers tonight. Jason Caldas, architect. Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Hamada will go first.
Hi,
Evening.
I'm a homeowner at 909 Santa Fe Avenue, and we are here because I'm very confused about why our project, which has been submitted, is at a standstill over 5 windows. And so Jason, my architect, will explain the background and what we're seeking and why. Thank you.
Jason Caldas, architect. Not here to get a planning commission vote on a staff design review, but I want to just note that because of the recent preliminary staff design review, it has come to my attention that the Planning Commission has for some time in the recent past adopted an undocumented policy to prohibit the use of vinyl-framed windows, and that also includes, per staff's interpretation, vinyl-clad wood-framed windows, and that this policy has found its way into the design review standard conditions of approval. The prohibition on using vinyl-frame windows or vinyl-clad wood windows is not articulated anywhere that is publicly accessible, not in the ordinance, not on the website, not in the San Pablo Avenue specific plan, or the design guidelines and objective standards that were adopted on July 18th, 2022. The prohibition on using vinyl-frame windows and vinyl-clad wood-frame windows is not articulated in the city's handout for window replacements. A 2022 edition was distributed to me yesterday. Though the document states vinyl retrofit windows are highly discouraged. In response to my request to understand the undocumented prohibition, staff cited concerns about the use of vinyl-containing products such as toxic manufacturing process, its difficulty of disposal, difficult to paint, and potentially paint damages the windows, causing them to warp and fail, considers them cheap and not durable, and alludes to problems during a fire. Staff has referred the applicant to the Planning Commission from where the prohibition of the use of vinyl-frame windows and vinyl-clad wood-frame windows stems. This is per the planning manager. I cannot find evidence of when this policy was adopted or when it was communicated to the public, or if the public were even engaged in the adoption of such a policy. As recent a project as Staff Design Review 2019-065, a bedroom addition at 640 San Gabriel that I was the design architect for. The permit was issued, applied for, staff review was approved, and a permit was issued for a project that contained Milgard Tuscany vinyl windows. The standard conditions of approval issued then did not list any prohibition or reference to window materials restrictions. However, over the course of 20 years of working in this community, we've often had to provide a detail that allowed a narrow profile window to be recessed so that we could get it to appear more historic and to give it shadow line. But the ban on the particular material is new to me, and I think it would be new to the rest of the community. With the standard conditions of approval as they have been described to me by staff, I haven't seen them yet, planning staff is not empowered to make a staff design review approval of the above referenced project for its specification of Anderson Series 200 and Series 400 vinyl-clad wood-framed windows. And if the applicant does not change the specification, the project cannot proceed. That's what Elizabeth was referring to. This determination is due to the prohibition of the vinyl windows having found its way into the city's standard conditions of approval. Again, I haven't encountered those.
All right, thank you. Your time is up. Thank you for your comments.
I will give the full statement and the correspondence to
Okay, fine, that's fine. No, we're not going to comment. I mean, if staff has a comment or clarifications, or we do more research and get into it.
We shouldn't comment on something at this
Okay.
point. If
Okay, fair enough.
at the end of the meeting, if you wish to have an agenda item to talk about vinyl window policy, that
Well, okay, we can leave that for a future item. Okay.
So there's someone else virtually who
another-
is wishing to speak, and Stephen Albert, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, good evening, council members and zoning members. This is Dr. Stephen Albert. I'm a resident of Berkeley, and I was surprised to receive it by mail a notice of public hearing regarding the proposed changes at 919 Ventura Avenue. I certainly don't recall receiving any similar notice from the Albany Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the 5-story mixed commercial residential building proposed for 1600 Solano Avenue. Whereas the project of 1600 Solano, if built, will permanently and drastically change the character of Solano Avenue. Proposed building variances under discussion at 919 Ventura Avenue are of little consequence to me. In contrast, if built, I will see the upper stories of the proposed 5-story structure at 1600 Solano Avenue from my front windows. Accordingly, on November 20, I sent an email to City Council members and to Community Development Director Jeff Baugh, indicating that the lack of notification regarding 1600 Solano as compared to 919 Ventura was the height of hypocrisy for the city. Mayor Aaron Tiedemann promptly responded to my email relating that, quote, "We held multiple similar public hearings for the 1600 Solano project." I responded that I was unaware of any of these planning and zoning meetings which occurred on January 26 and April 27 of 2020, as I reside more than 300 feet from the building site at 1600 Solano. This afternoon, I spoke with Sabrina in Community Development at the Albany City Hall, who confirmed that I had not received notification from the planning and zoning meetings regarding 1600 Solano Avenue. As an aside, Sabrina was extremely helpful and is commended for her public service. My point is, whereas the city follows its approved ordinances regarding notification only those within 300 feet of a proposed building project, this practice is utterly inappropriate for a project as large as 1600 Solano Avenue, which will greatly and permanently change the character of Solano Avenue and impact the entire city. It is clear to me and many of your Albany residents, constituents, that this practice is a thinly veiled cover for pushing through new building projects by purposely not notifying all Albany residents. Thank you for listening to me.
All right, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to
Anyone
speak?
else wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda, please use the raise the hand icon. No one else wishes to
No one else? Okay, thank you. We will close the public comment section and move on to our next agenda item, which is item 7-1, planning application 23-021925 Adams Street. Design review request to convert an existing 1,928 square foot two-story commercial building into a residential unit and construct 2 additional attached 3-story residential units. Staff, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, hi.
Good evening.
I'm Leslie Mendez, Planning Manager, and tonight we have the design review and use permit application 21-021 for 925 Adams Street. The project site is a 5,000 square foot lot on the east side of Adams Street with Solano Avenue to the north and Buchanan to the south. It is located in the R3 high-density residential zone and is also located within the San Pablo Avenue specific plan area. Currently, the site is developed with an approximately 2,000 square foot, 2-story cinder block commercial building located at the rear of the property, actually at the rear left and rear property line. The remainder of the lot is mostly covered with kind of a gravel parking area and some landscaping. There is a small street tree in the front of the property towards the south, as well as a very large oak tree that straddles the property line between 925 Adams and 929 Adams. The project request is to convert the 1,928 square foot, 2-story commercial building into a residential unit. This would have 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and it would have a 405 square foot roof deck. The roof deck railings do require use permit approval because they are located in that non-conforming rear yard setback. 2 attached 3-story residential units would be constructed towards the front of the lot. Unit 1 at the front of the lot would be approximately 1,600 square feet, be 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and have a 1-car garage and a 245 square foot roof deck. Unit 1 would have a private front yard. Unit 2, which would be located in the middle, would be approximately 1,800 square feet and would be a 3-bedroom, 4-bathroom residence with a 1-car garage. Units 2, extra square footage results from a 2nd-story cantilever that would cantilever over the relocated driveway that's located along the south side of the property. And it would have, yes, so the cantilever also allows a deck over it on the Unit 2. There would be 1 uncovered parking space for Unit 3. That's the existing building at the rear that would be located at the end of the driveway. And Unit 3 would also have a private side/rear yard. This project went before the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 14th of this year. At that time, just to summarize the comments, there was comments about the space between the buildings. Previously, the 3 units were detached and had spaces between 4 feet and 5 feet, and it was thought that space was kind of awkward. It was inefficient use of building materials and energy. and would just collect like just an unusable space. There were comments that the front facades of the buildings were kind of turned away from the street, and that should either be improved and/or there should be a kind of announced pedestrian entrance towards the pedestrian entry towards the side of the buildings. There were comments about the cantilever on Unit 2 saying that it was kind of awkward and didn't really connect with the rest of the building. Kind of uniform comments that there should be sufficient enclosed and secured bike parking, and that bike parking should allow space for cargo bikes as well, so the longer kind of space for that. One commissioner commented that the parapets should be pulled kind of further away from the property to the north. There was also a comment that some of the window placements on Unit 1 and 2, the new units, were kind of random and maybe a little disorganized. And then we heard from the public regarding tree preservation. There was kind of heartfelt about the street tree, which it was my understanding that they had planted, as well as the existing oak tree, just concerned that there would be damage to the oak tree during construction. And finally, there were also some concerns from the neighbor to the north that the new construction would have shading impacts on the newly installed photovoltaic rooftop PV panels. So here is a revised proposed site plan that demonstrates some of the revisions since it went to the study session. First of all, as mentioned, the 3 units are now attached units. This is to comply with the R3 standards. The units either have to be attached or have a 10-foot separation, and that wasn't really possible for the design on the site. So the units are now attached. That has the benefit of reducing kind of that awkward ground level space. It has created bike parking for Unit 1 and 2, secure bike parking between the units on the ground floor level that is sufficiently sized for cargo bikes. It allowed an angled garage parking space for Unit 2, which helps with the accessibility, the ingress and egress for that unit. The upper units are still separated, have the 4 and 5 foot separation, which still allows for increased kind of fenestration and the sunshine entering the buildings. And also, since these are proposed to be condominiums, it does allow the buyer to have kind of a feel of a single detached unit while not having that detached bit on the ground floor. And in addition, to enhance the project street presence, a French door garage was added to Unit 1. And this not only kind of provides a doorway and faces the street, but it also creates a flexible space for that garage, that it can then be used maybe as a workshop or an office or a study, and isn't necessarily limited to kind of an enclosed dark parking space. And also the project now includes a concrete pedestal that would have the address on it to help guide pedestrian traffic to the front entrances. You can't see my cursor. It's kind of hard to see, but it is that little black box on the right side. The numbers are in orange, but I can't point it out with my cursor. The project has retained the cantilever for Unit 2, but it has made sure, because they like the light and as well as the additional space. Also, since Unit 2 doesn't have a private yard, it provides extra balcony space for Unit 2. To better integrate the design, however, the posts and beams are now proposed to be stuccoed to match the rest of the building. And again, I had a hard time seeing it, but if you see that far right beam used to be kind of a black metal, now it will have a stucco finish to match the rest of the building. In addition, a trellis has been added between the beams above the driveway that would match the trellis at the front of the property, and evergreen clematis vines are proposed at the base of these trellises to grow and also soften. There would also be additional vine and trellising on the north facade of the building to help soften that side. Additional revisions that will occur when they submit for a building permit and which have been added as conditions of approval but haven't not yet been incorporated in the plans is that the parapet on the front facade of Unit 1 will be angled to comply with the 45-degree daylight plane standard. In addition, the parking will be enlarged slightly to meet the minimum dimensions as required by our ordinance. Although parking soon is not required, if you do provide parking, it does need to meet our standards, which are just going to be a little bit larger. Additionally, the roof railings on the Unit 3, which is the existing building, will need to be solid for screening. That is to comply with the objective standard within the San Pablo specific plan ordinance. And finally, there will be extensive tree protection measures. The applicants hired a certified arborist to prepare a tree protection plan, and that was included as attachment 5 to your packet. This was prepared to ensure the viability of the tree, and to ensure that the tree retains viability, we have conditioned the project to implement all the recommendations and monitoring as recommended in that plan, and that is over and above the standard tree protection measures. And I just want to note here that this is a bit of a good neighbor and a goodwill gesture. It is not something that is in our zoning ordinance or required by general plan policy or anything else. It is of value to the neighbor, but it is also of value to the property owners to retain that tree. So it is very important for them as well. So just to mention some additional project contributions, since this is a larger project than many of the ones we see in front of the commission. So the applicants have agreed to do all electric construction, which is wonderful. They will also be required to comply with the city's green building resolution. And that includes things as requiring permeable paving, Energy Star rated appliances, low flow kitchen faucets, as well as other requirements. The project is required to comply and contribute with the public art contributions, so they can either do that on site or pay the fee. If they do it on site, choose to do it on site, that will go before you, the art that they choose. And finally, this is 3 new dwelling units, so that's a very positive contribution in getting us closer to our RHNA goals, our regional housing allocation goals. So with that, the project meets the purposes of the zoning district, of the specific plan and general plan and housing element. It's a redevelopment of an underutilized property, creating 3 infill missing middle home ownership opportunities. So staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to findings and conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm here for any questions, and the applicant team is here as well to answer any questions you guys may have. So thank you.
Okay, first, why don't we see if any commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner Moman, go ahead, please.
I have a question, clarifying question to the staff, and then a few questions to the applicant. So first, to staff, does this project subject to the 45-degree daylight plane requirement? Since this is part of the specific plan area, I thought the parcels facing Adams Avenue and Keynes Avenue have the new step back rule, which applies about 38 feet.
No, and believe me, we tried all different ways to address this. Since it is R3, it is within the San Pablo specific plan area, but within the R3 district and not fronting San Pablo Avenue, it is subject to the 45-degree daylight plane.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 other quick questions, just in the conditions of approval. There were just 2 that I hadn't seen before that I had questions on. First, on the window relief, I'm very familiar with us seeing, sort of apropos to the last comment, the 2-inch recess from the wall plane, that's standard. But in that condition number 6, the second sentence says that flat or flush windows are prohibited unless there's a projection or recess of 4 inches in depth from the primary facade. And I've just never seen that requirement, and I was curious about that one. Maybe we'll just take these one at a time.
So that's a great question. So conditions number 5 through 10 are directly out of the San Pablo specific plan objective design standards. So those are not, we don't put them on all projects, it's just those that are within the specific plan area.
I guess I didn't realize we had a 4-inch. So how does that sort of jive with the 2-inch requirement? Like what prevails?
That's a great question too, since I hope they're not both in there. And if they are, I would request that we eliminate the 2. I think the ones in the specific plan prevail because that is that is cut and pasted from the objectives.
It's all in the same condition. So condition number 6 says both 2 inches and 4 inches. So is it just 4 inches on the, and I guess then the question is like primary facade for this project. I'm not sure whether that's the Adams Street facing or like the interior quote unquote front wall that the garages are on. But it says 2 inches from the surrounding wall plane and then 4 inches from the primary facade in the same condition.
Could
They
it,
seem to kind of be referring to the same thing, but I wasn't sure
Yeah.
if by the 4-inch we were talking about more of like
That or
a shadow
flexibility.
box or a bay window or something that was more sort of like a change in plane rather than the window itself? Because I just don't remember us ever saying that a window, I mean, a 4-inch recess reveal for a window is very difficult with sort of contemporary construction methods. And so it's going to be very hard to achieve on any project. I don't doubt that it comes from our specific plan, but I'm now having a little bit of like practicality heartburn on that.
You know, now I have that same heartburn. Thank you. Do you have any background on that 4-inch recess?
I don't recall talking about
Okay.
that at the commission level, at least certainly not in depth.
Okay.
Thank you, I can make my assumptions, but it could be like the shadow box kind of window that they're,
Okay. Do we have the latitude then to make an amendment to that condition of approval tonight, even though that's an objective design standard? If the commission so chooses?
I think it would be helpful to have clarification
Okay.
to that, because thank you for pointing that. I was like, oh, this one.
I don't know how the ordinance is written exactly, but the way this is written in the conditions of approval, it sounds like either or. It sounds like one or the other, that if the windows are not recessed 2 inches, if they're flush with the wall plane, you could do the 4-inch
Right, yeah.
surround. I mean, that's how I would interpret it.
Like projecting fins
We have
or
a,
something?
we have a visual. We have.
Let's see the,
Maybe the words just don't make sense, but the graphics do.
okay.
I think this may be what they were referring to. If the window lacks a 2-inch recess, then this 4-inch.
It's like an architectural projection or sort of a shadow fin. Not the window framing itself needs to move, but something surrounding it.
And the
Okay.
text is right here.
Got it.
You know, I read that as if it's not recessed 2 inches and if you have it flush with the wall plane, then you have to do the 4-inch,
Like
That's-
architectural.
like a window
Yeah, box.
box
Yeah,
frame or
okay.
something. I mean, that's the way I read it. So I would say there's,
That makes sense to me. And so maybe we move with that presumption, but just looking at the words alone in the conditions of approval, that's not
Right.
super clear. So we might want to make some, editorial changes for conditions of approval moving forward so that people actually know what we're talking about.
sounds good.
The second question that I had was on condition of approval number 8, so maybe, Jeff, that same graphic or one of those graphics might be equally helpful. But the bird-safe glazing condition, specifically subsection A, and I know it says it's a requirement that, it may include but need not be limited to. It's referring to the color of someone's blinds or curtains, and I feel like that's not something that's regulated by the Planning Commission. I have again, a little bit of heartburn dictating the color that somebody chooses to paint their blinds or curtains on the inside of their home. I think that's beyond the purview of our commission. And I understand it's an option, but I would just rather strike that altogether and give options that have to do with the exterior architectural materials on the building. I don't know how A got in there. Clearly, I know I was here when this was adopted. I probably should have read that more closely, but I some concerns about us
So that is one I did notice, actually, when I was like, oh, how are we going to regulate that? So yes, we're not going to regulate, but I would like to give, since it is part of the options that are allowed, that if for whatever reason they don't want to use pane glass with mullions or glass colored with permanent patterns, that they can have the option. And I guess at that point, it's just like Scouts honor that they'll put up like colored lines and be retained.
Maybe I would just flag that I know we have our work program, so I won't talk about it later on, but maybe we start acquiring a list of some edits as we start implementing the San Pablo area plan that we might want to take forward as kind of cleanup items. And I would nominate those two as the first on the list. So that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Mr. Hudson, for this project?
I have a question for the staff about how was the solar in the building 919 Adams accommodated? Because the height of the new construction, I went by today just to see, seems to perhaps deprive them of the use of this alternative way of providing electricity.
So there will be shading impacts on the neighbor to the north. However, there is no regulations or laws. There are only for vegetation that you can't block a neighbor's solar panels with vegetation. It does not apply to new construction. So although there may be impacts, there are no regulations to prohibit the construction that meets the development standards, underlying development standards.
Might there be some accommodation to offset lost electricity provided because they won't have access to that solar provided energy?
There might be, yes, if there was one that was offered and that was acceptable to the project applicants. Yes.
Just thinking it might be suggested. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I have, well, just to revisit the solar daylight plane. It's for the front yard setback in this case.
Correct.
And it's not shading anything, any public, it's shading the street, it's shading the front yard. It is not affecting anything and no neighbors. So can we waive that as an, I mean, I'm just wondering.
There is no provision within the zoning ordinance to make a modification for that daylight plane. And I looked rather deeply. I think the applicants, the director and I all gave it our best shot, and we did not find a way to
waive that or modify it.
Exactly.
So, and I read that it has to be set 4 feet back from, at 28 feet.
About 28 feet.
28 feet, they have to set it back.
At 28 feet, they have a 45-degree daylight plane. So what they'll need to do, unfortunately, is either, have an angled parapet at 45 degree, because currently they meet the height limit at the roof. It's just the parapet that's over, or they can move it back 4 feet. Or they can dome it, but yes.
I guess it would have been nice to see that in the plans. Okay, other questions? Right, the similar with the objective standards for the parapets being solid, we cannot modify that standard, or?
That is correct. That is,
That's also part of the San Pablo Avenue specific?
it is. All roof deck areas shall be screened from neighboring properties with a solid guardrail or parapet. Or that could be slightly modified to say screened from neighboring properties. So, it doesn't need to be a solid stucco wall, but it can't be visual, can't be.
It should be a solid
can't
surface
be,
of some kind.
It can't be glass, tempered glass. It needs to be.
And it also says roof deck areas, or?
Yes.
Because not all the roof is roof deck.
Pardon?
Not all of the roof area is roof deck. Roof deck to me is the habitable space or usable space.
Correct. And on Unit 1 currently in the plan set, it shows open railings. So this condition was specifically, instead of having them redraw again, that tiny detail, that those railings around the roof deck on Unit 1, which is the existing building, be solid or otherwise, screen the visibility.
The back unit.
Correct.
That's Unit 3, yeah. So,
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Unit
right,
3.
sorry.
1, 2, 3. Yes,
right.
thank you. The one at the rear, yes.
Okay. All right, that's not really the one.
But technically, it would apply to all the roof decks.
Okay, just clarifying that. Okay, I don't have any other questions, so.
I have one more.
You have one more?
So is there any projection permitted in the front setback?
Is there any projection, I'm
Right.
sorry,
Yeah,
that it
up-
is allowed above? No, I mean, at the ground level, there's like projections for awnings and patios and the like, but not at that level.
No, like for the level 1 and 2, level 2 and 3. Like typically we have bay windows, in San Francisco, like 3 feet of bay windows is permitted over the sidewalk above certain height.
So I'm not sure I'm understanding the
Like balconies or something, they're projected outside the main
Like-
facade of the building. So sometimes there is like a bay window,
So there, yes, so there are allowable encroachments.
correct, right?
So are you thinking particularly for one area? So right now?
Yeah, I was like, thinking of suggesting that on the street side,
So on the street
that would-
side,
yeah.
at the, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't work for the roof deck, because that would be with.
No,
the
not for
daylight
roof
plan.
deck, sorry.
Okay.
I'm just like, not related to roof.
Yes,
just for a
so
facade improvement.
balconies, I believe they can encroach 6 feet into the front yard setback.
And bay windows, like a full bay,
There it is. Projecting bays may go 2 feet 6 inches into
2
any
feet 6
required
inches. And are there width requirement, like maximum width? I think there are like,
A maximum width equal to 25% of the wall plane from which bay projects.
okay. So total length of the that face, the projection can be just 25% of that.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? We could have a presentation by the applicants. Any questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I had, but if they are going to.
Yeah, if you'd like to give us
presentation, I
a-
can do after that.
State your name and, yeah,
Henry Fleischman. I'm
Good
one of
evening.
the co-owners and architect for 925 Adams.
I think they don't have,
Yeah, I don't have anything.
No, I
so
think that-
if you had questions for
okay,
him.
well, if you have a question,
Yeah, I just had a general question, like, did you explore, this property has 1.5 FAR, and that allows you to build up to 7,500 square feet, and you are proposing about 5,500 square feet. So
Yeah.
just wondering, like, did you explore any, alternatives in which you added like more units than 3?
We did, we kind of, we did, but it got to be a really big building. And there are a number of really big buildings already on that block, so I felt like we kind of came up with a solution that makes it feel a little bit more within the neighborhood, and then also allows for each unit to have a little bit more, all 3 units, we were able to just bring a lot of natural light in, and so we really kind of prioritized that. And part of that also goes into making it feel more like homes, single-family homes, than just a big apartment block. So that was the main thinking behind not maxing out on size.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then I have just like small minor questions related to plan. So just wondering like how you are going to access the bike rooms between those 2 new units. There is some kind of graphic indication, not clear whether that's a a rolling door or something else?
Yeah, these are for the two bike
Right, yeah.
storage units. Yeah, we're imagining that they're just kind of roll-up doors. They're both 5 foot wide, so the door could be at least 3 feet, probably even a little bit more wide, and then you just have a roll-up door and really easy access.
And then in the parking area for the rear unit, it's kind of little wider than, necessary.
Mhm.
So and you have shown trash enclosure there. So wondering, are you intending that space to be used for something else?
I think probably just more flex space. We do have a little planting against the fence in that area, and as we go through, we might widen that planting area out, but there's not a lot of, it's somewhat tight. Like a little bit of flex space is probably not
I'm
a bad
asking
thing.
because you have put the, bike enclosure in the front yard.
Oh, in the front instead of the back?
It's kind of, eating up that corner of that nice front yard.
Yeah, and I
You could,
think it,
relocate that next to
Yeah.
the parking and, you would have nice square front yard.
yeah, I think the idea was just basically that Unit 3 would have such a big private yard that we would put the bike unit there, because there's space for it there, and then, if they have more than one bike, that can be kind of modified to hold other things as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's
But-
your preference, but like it makes sense to have all parking in one location and then your front
Yeah.
yard is,
Yeah.
nicely landscaped.
Yeah, and I have no opposition to that either. I think it was, but
It's just a suggestion, if you don't.
yeah, we definitely look into that.
Yeah, thank you. That's all.
I guess that bike enclosure there is only for Unit 3, is that?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, the other Unit 1 would have this bike included. Yeah, and then Unit 2 would have the one in the back.
Just a question on that. There wasn't a door shown to access those? The door was on the interior side? You couldn't seem to get to it from the outside? Is that just a drafting error?
For
The bike parking for either of the two spaces?
It
Like,
might
I didn't
have
see
been-
it to be an exterior door access?
I think these are where the roll-up doors are. We might.
Oh, it's a
I'm not-
roll-up door.
Yeah, I'm not.
Got it.
There may have been a drafting
Okay, I didn't
area.
see the
But yeah, the idea is that
door
those
swing.
are the
Okay.
roll-ups.
Got it. So one of those is for Unit 2 access from the back side, and then
Right.
one's from the drive aisle.
Exactly.
And those are closets with doors on one plan, so,
Yeah, on the interior closet would be where the water. It's basically for the water heater and
Mechanical
mechanical room.
space.
Yeah.
okay. Right, okay. And you'll have heat pumps outside somewhere?
Yeah, the heat pumps would go on top of those roofs.
On the roof or,
On the roofs of the bike.
oh, in
storage.
between the buildings?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, I think be hidden.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, then we'll close. I'm sorry, yes, public comment. Right, regular public comment, yes. Next thing. We're closing the applicant's session here, and now moving to public comment.
Hi, good evening. My name is Pantip Shivalit. I am the resident and the homeowner of 919 Adam Street, which is adjacent to the north of 925. I'm glad that you have it right. It's 919, it's not 923. Because in the planning, it said 923. I just want to clarify about a few items. The daylight plane requirement. It's in the condition of approval that apply to building 1. And I'm, because I'm not familiar with the building code, so I can't quite get it that there is no regulation or anything that will require the adjacent building, to have sunlight, with this kind of construction. Because for me, I planned my house extensively before I built. It's still ongoing. And I would like to take the benefit of having solar installment. With these 2 new buildings, they definitely cast the shadows onto my roof. So I want to know if there is a remedy or something that, could be done that we all can benefit from this. I'm not objecting to construction. You know, we live in the urban area. And I feel like, you know, even my design, when I design my house, I look around and I put a lot of thought into it. So because I want it to blend into my neighborhood. And I want to put my respect to my neighborhood for whatever I have done. Because I think they have really high tolerance to construction. You know, I was there in this house when the condominium next to me was built. It was a long process. We had that, okay? And then when my house is being built, my neighborhood is also like put, you know, that tolerance into my construction. And I appreciate that. And I want to be respectful to their, you know, the neighborhood also. So that's my question about daylight plan. Because it said it's applied to only building one. So I just don't understand that. Going back to the condition of approval for the tree protection measure, appreciate it, because that tree has been there and it's been a star of our street, basically. Everybody walk by there, it's beautiful. My question, I don't know how extensive the tree protection will be according to the arborist.
Sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Can I just have one more minute?
Okay, go ahead.
And the impact on my work, because it said in there that you know, in the, I work from 4 to 12 midnight. I'm a nurse. You know, I monitor patients in the hospital. And according to, I'm just going to go quickly, according to item 37, I believe, that the construction will go on 7 days a week, 8 to 6, Monday to Friday, and 10 to 6 on weekend and holidays. I think that is quite, if you look at the item number 37, I don't know if I misunderstood it, but that was, I understood that it's going to be going on for 7 days a week. I think that put up quite a big impact on my work. And then if you look at across the street, it's the school. That is also from 8 to 6. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in the room or virtual? Anyone online?
If you'd like to speak on this item, please use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen. No one else wishes to
No one?
speak.
Okay, we will close public comment and move to commissioner discussion. And just one point of clarification for the last speaker is that the building activity and noise levels are regulated by the building department, and any complaints would have to go through building department. And then generally they're not working 7 days a week, but you know, no, generally not, and you know, work hours are limited also. Okay, would anyone like to start off with comments or discussion?
I can start.
Okay, Commissioner Momin, please.
So I think this is an important project for the city to add 3 additional units, and I think it's a good project that converts one of the existing structure into residential units and add 2 units. I wish they had added more. I have kind of mixed response in terms of design for this project. Some of the aspects are very successful in the design, and some needs some refinement and congruence of the ideas. I understand the constraints you are working with, with the neighborhood context as well as the existing structure far back, and also the a nice live oak tree that you want to protect. So considering all that, I think the overall arrangement that you have done with the existing unit modifying with a nice back front yard, and then the 2 new units parallel to the street, not facing the street, served by a driveway, which I think makes sense. I think the conversion of the existing rear structure into a residential unit is most successful. The layout you have done there is nice. You have arranged the space nicely, in the living room, dining room, kitchen, facing the front yard, and then the bedrooms above on the upper floor, having the frontages. All that has been arranged in a nice way. I just have a suggestion for the staircase location. Is it possible to put up the plan on the screen?
What was it that you wanted to see?
The plan, basically, ground level plan or upper level plan. Maybe the floor plan, not the site plan. You can go down, I think. No, go down the other way, yeah. Yeah, you can. There, yeah. So I think the staircase, the way it has been arranged, kind of creates, extra circulation space. Kind of a U-shaped corridor on level 2, and similarly on level 1 also. Can you show the level 1 plan? Go up slightly. Yeah. So I think if you flip the stair horizontally and put it along the north wall, right next to that refrigerator, that would open up the space more, and then it would eliminate that the hallway behind the corridor on both the levels.
Do you allow that to respond?
Sorry.
Can I respond?
Sure. Yeah.
The one thing I'll say, that's where we had it, and I think you're 100% right. I talked with my engineer because it's.
Can you come up to the?
In talking with the engineer, everything you said is 100% right. And in talking with the engineer, we had to have it a certain distance away because the opening a certain distance away because. And I was a little because that basically we have to have shear all along that back wall. So it was for engineering purposes.
I see. Okay.
We had to move that
There are
out.
structural constraints.
It's a very good point.
Okay, got it. Okay, no problem. Okay, and then I just had the another suggestion I mentioned earlier. The bike enclosure could be next to the parking. That would make that whole courtyard open for landscape planting and trees and all that. And then regarding the new townhomes, I'm still not very convinced with the gap between the two new units. I think it is still kind of not very efficient, particularly when you are dealing with a very tight condition at ground level for garage, turning, and all that. I think you could add that space to the garage, make it more spacious, and maybe also you can you show the plan, please? Yeah, so I was wondering if you could flip the front unit and put the garage inside, and then you have like two garages next to each other and recessed back. You could have a deeper driveway, and that might help you for turning, and you could widen them, like use all that gap, 2 feet added to the front unit, 2 feet added to the south next second unit, and you have wider garage and push recess back. That might create bigger opening for turning, and you could use like turning in both direction, not just like reversing all the way back to the door, street. And that would also, if you flip the front unit, it would put the entry facing the street, and then you can use the front yard that is facing the street for your entrance to the front unit 1, and that would be more active and interactive with the house rather than like having one garage door which would be mostly closed. And then I think the front elevation still need a lot of improvement. It is just like flat. Even if you have trellis on the upper level, I don't think trellis, we can rely much on the trellis because it depends on the health of the plants to be successful. And if the vines don't grow 25 feet, you would just see bare trellis and nothing else. And so that is the reason I earlier asked staff question if you can project on this side. Because, for the unit 2, you projected on the, south side so that you could have like a bigger bedrooms. You could, for the unit 1, you could project on the street side, and that would give you additional area on both the levels. Your bedrooms could be bigger, and you could have like nice 2 bays, typically like they do in San Francisco in traditional as well as modern buildings. And that would give some like, character to the front elevation. Yeah, that's
Comments?
I think all I have to suggest.
So, Acting Chair, Vice Chair McLeod, I do want to say that there is now someone in the public virtually who's raising their hand. So it is your prerogative whether to reopen the public hearing or not.
Yeah, no problem. Why don't we reopen public comment for one virtual speaker?
Okay. Charlie, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, excellent, thank you. I just wanted to understand and ask the commission board as well as the owners of 925 how they will approach all of the stipulations that some of the arborists have mentioned in regards to maintaining the health as well as the safety of the coast live oak that they've identified on the property of 929. There are a number of stipulations regarding how much heavy machinery they may have within the area, as well as how much or how they impact the soil regarding it, as well as perhaps having an arborist that is on site whenever they sort of work around the RPZ, the root protection zone, which is about 14 foot wide across the trunk of the coast live oak. So I'm just wondering how they'll make sure and approach and certify that measures such as that have been outlined are make sure that they're taken quite seriously, as well as within the conditions of approval. There are a number of things regarding levels of dust, as well as safety of the general public, how they'll ensure that the safety of all of the residents within the area are guaranteed, and how that will ensure that we all are able to sort of maintain public right-of-way and access, because recently we've noticed they've sort of already started to do construction within the area, sort of laying down the pipes, quite literally, which we're unsure of in terms of how the project is moving forward, because to our understanding of a lot of the residents, we would have this public meeting and public hearing before we would see sort of major construction starting to happen, and they've sort of done all of this work ahead of time, and we were just wondering how that fits within the chronology of the project as well. So those are the sort of the 3 points, because as mentioned by a previous resident, that there is a preschool at 924, which does operate from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., which are quite similar hours to the proposed work times as well. So we're just looking to ensure that our safety and our public health is guaranteed within the sort of the timeline of this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. No one else in the queue, I assume, so
No one else.
we will close public comment again and move back to commissioner discussion. Thank you. Commissioner Moman, you done?
I'm done, thank you.
Commissioner Wadi, please.
Sure, I'm happy to share some comments. Overall, similarly, I'm very supportive of the project. Again, I think these are the kind of sites that add to the incremental density that we need within the city. This is, on Solano, a block off of, this is where we're really needing to encourage our density. And I actually think this project does it in sort of a delicate way. Instead of clearing the whole site and, going for a larger project. I think this sort of townhome approach is a nice way to add density in sort of an incremental way, in a way that still feels like the character of Albany. And so I very much also want us to sort of set the tone that this is the type of project that we want to see, and that we're not going to, sort of death by a thousand cuts here. And, I think with a lot of projects, we can continue to nitpick and quote unquote refine. But I also am trying to pull back at a point of, does this comply with our design standards for San Pablo? Does this comply with our design guidelines that are more on the sort of residential side? Does it really deviate in any way from some of our standards that we've established, as opposed to just maybe personal preference here or there? So with that being said, I would still encourage you to continue, taking some of the design comments that have been said today and iterating, and hopefully those are things that can continue to happen with staff if you have some iterations. But I think that we're at a place where this is an approvable design. Again, the conditions of approval reinforce what we're sort of seeing on plan here. I think, although I hear what Commissioner Moman is saying with regard to sort of the flat design, and we should never rely on pretty rendered landscaping actually panning out. The windows are required to have that recess like we were talking about before. Like there will inherently be articulation based on that window, and that's why I think that's one of those principles to the earlier public commenter. It's one of the reasons we have that requirement for the 2-inch, is that alone is sometimes the sole articulation on the front facade of a building. So the fact that that is a condition of approval here, I'm supportive of this project. I think this block also, it has a wide diversity of building typologies. There's not one universal architectural design, so I think that also gives a little bit greater latitude for doing something that's a little bit different than what we see throughout many other parts of Albany. So all in all, I'm supportive of this project and would be happy to make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hudson, comments or discussion?
I think it's a really innovative use of the space, and I agree that you're really working towards getting more units in Albany, meeting our housing requirements, or the housing element. I guess the only thing is we have competing interest, obviously, because we're not able to preserve solar efforts in the adjacent home while still providing the amount of space that you want to put on that property on 925. I don't know what the options are to satisfy the people who live in 919. I'm just trying to think out loud here whether the panels they have on their house could be moved to the top of the new construction and allow them to then reap the benefits of some sun, which they will probably lose quite a bit of with the new construction. I don't know what else to do, or unless there's some compensation that could be provided. It's not up to you, it's up to the new owners, obviously, but offset what they don't get from their solar that I think looks pretty new. I think it's probably newly installed, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and I think your son may have come in the June hearing and mentioned that. And so I was remembering that, and anyway, those are my thoughts, but I really commend you for the design of that space. I'm really impressed.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I have some things also. I agree with everything that's been said. And I agree, big picture, this is exactly the kind of infill project we want to encourage. Exactly, we're taking mostly a vacant lot and turning it into housing units and reconverting an existing building, which is an environmentally appropriate thing to do. Adaptive reuse is probably a great way to save resources and lower your carbon footprint for this building, so that's great. Really like that idea. So looking at the plans, I mean, overall, I think it's good. I'm happy that you're moving forward with it, and I appreciate the changes you've made since you last came. I think it's mostly in a positive direction. But then we do have certain things, like Commissioner Hudson said, there are competing, not just demands, but competing requirements. The parapet, for one, and the solar panel installation on your roof are at odds. I wish there was some way to waive that a little bit. But anyway, wanted to move back to just some comments about design, and Commissioner Moomin raised some good points. Moving the bicycle shed maybe to the driveway space would be good. I mean, that would also be another place to put an additional bicycle shed. The other thing we're trying to encourage is active transportation and reduced car use, reduced vehicle miles traveled. So the more you can do for bicycle storage and encouraging bicycles usage, the safer our streets are, the less pollution there is generated and less congestion. And you are on a bicycle boulevard, designed exactly for that purpose, to get residents to and from locations throughout our city. And that is going to be improving as we improve our bicycle network. So anything you can do to add more bicycle parking is great. And I do appreciate the spaces between the two units for bike parking and the bike shed in the back, which looks big enough for cargo bikes if the entrance is kind of configured correctly. Back to the point about the buildings being separated higher up, I still disagree with that approach. I think it should be one building across. And I think you should also infill the space between Unit 2 and Unit 3 at the second story. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer to not have that space between the buildings, because you have higher energy costs, you have higher exterior finish costs, you have an opportunity to provide more square footage for your living spaces. And I think you could sell it for more. I think it just makes economic sense. The idea of these being single-family home-like is kind of, I'd say it's kind of a myth, or they're not. They're apartment buildings, basically. And they're still going to have their own individual identities, and I don't think you're getting much out of the windows that are in that space. There's only one or two, in fact. So if they were combined, I would keep the bicycle parking. I would combine the two units at the upper two levels, and you could have even just one access stair to the roof that could be shared through a couple of doors and a little hallway. Would increase your flexibility on the roof space, would increase the flexibility as to where you can put the solar panels. It just makes a lot of sense to me, and I would do that. And also infill a niche between Unit 2 and 3. You certainly could use what looks to me like is going to be a dead space between those two buildings. And then getting back to the front facade, I agree with Commissioner Moomin about kind of it's a pretty flat facade, and the trellises, I don't know if you're really going to get vines up all that high, and I would encourage doing some sort of different window treatment. You're west-facing, you could use some sort of awnings or shading devices to give that a little more interest and actually provide a little better comfort, a little less heat gain. The other things I was thinking, the steel beams coming out that are supporting that bedroom projection at Unit 2, I would be happy with that being steel, black steel. Then it would look, I don't think that's what I was objecting to when I made the comments before. It wasn't necessarily the steel itself. I'm okay with making that unit bigger bedroom. But if it were black steel, it would match the other black elements that are all around the building and kind of tie it together. Distinguish between what's actual livable space and kind of more decorative things. The other thing, it is all stucco. I mean, there is a way you can differentiate materials to maybe reduce the effect of the parapets. I wish we could remove some of the parapets, and I actually wish we could see the design with the setback of the parapets in the front. I would have appreciated seeing that before it came to us. And then I do have kind of a problem with It's a conflict in our regulations, I think, between the parapet and the solar panels. Can you bring up the roof plan, please? It would be A 1.2. And I don't know how you resolve this because the solar panels are going to be shaded by the parapet. And also, the lower ones on Unit 3 are shaded by your other building. I really don't, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. So it's a conflict. I don't know how to resolve it. Those panels should be on the lower unit, should be more to the right and rear. So they're not shaded by the building and the parapet. Sort of where the roof deck is kind of in the wrong place, but that's where it's overlooking the nicer part of the garden. I get it, there are conflicts. And it can we scroll down a little bit at the upper roof? No, I'm sorry, scroll up, go up. Yeah, right there. I mean, if you had those combined, if that building was combined, you could have one roof deck ladder access stair and more flexibility and more roof space for both your solar panels and your, is that supposed to be a habitable roof deck? I'm not quite sure, but anyway, the solar panels are almost entirely shaded along the edge by the parapet. So, you know, they need to be back and to the right mostly. So I don't know how that's solved, but just something, it's your dilemma, I guess, as the designer, owner. You have to raise them up, so yeah. Still, what's the point of the parapet?
I was going to ask again, I know you brought this up, so is the parapet a requirement for all of those, for buildings 1 and 2?
The parapet is not a requirement. The only requirement is that any roof deck area is screened from view from neighboring properties.
Screen by view means some sort of solid railing, not like a
Solid,
glass or a cable rail.
Yes,
Those
exactly.
are prohibited, and is that San Pablo?
The San Pablo specific plan area. And since I'm speaking, I do want to announce that Chair Pilch arrived at 8:11 p.m.
Okay, well, I don't really have any other comments. I mean, in general, I support the project. I'd like to see some refinements or some improvements. I would have appreciated seeing it with the setback of the parapet in the front. And so we can either proceed with a motion, or Commissioner Pilch, I don't know if you're able or willing or have heard enough to make comments, or you've prepared comments.
No, I think I'll be abstaining from this since I wasn't present for most of this discussion.
Okay.
But thank you for asking, and apologies for being late. I seem to be having some electronic calendar problems, and I don't think we received an email about when the agenda materials were posted. We had previously been receiving that in the past on the Friday before, so that often was a clue for me that something was going to happen. Anyway,
Okay.
back to you.
Yeah, okay, and I just had one, couple other small comments, and one is just the entry doors. They just seem to lack definition. It seems like you need something else there to kind of announce their presence. And then I'm ambivalent about the French doors to the garage. When you see it in plan with the car there, they, to me, look kind of ridiculous. I get the idea of maybe it's a flex space, but then, you know, you don't really have a workshop area out in front. You have a garden. You know, what are you going to do? Take your woodworking tools out there, work in the garden. I don't know. I would put the French doors in the bedroom. Those French doors in the garage are going to look an awful lot like the main entrance to the building, and that's going to look a little odd to me. So if there are no further comments, or anybody have any responses, or?
Just a question. This is an item that's returning to us that we previously reviewed.
Yes.
Right? All right, thank you.
Yes, we saw it about 6 months ago or so. Or?
So, Commissioner McLeod, to sort of answer your question, I would be supportive of moving this project forward for approval, but with a couple sort of items that we sort of continue to give some flexibility for the design to be further refined and working with staff. I don't disagree with any of the points that you called out. I think certainly the, I like when it comes to the French doors on the garage, at some level, I like it better than nothing being there. I think it does add some articulation, but I hear what you said, that I think that it is also a little confusing that it's like leading to some, living room communal space, and are people going to be knocking on that door instead of the primary entry door? Agree with the point of some sort of additional sort of, quote, celebration to the primary entrances. The primary entry doors feel a little flat for the 3 units, but that could be something as simple as like an awning or a canopy over those doors. So I think there's simple enough changes that the architect could work on later. And then thirdly, I think the rooftop parapet and solar issue, I think there's a lot of different ways that can be resolved, but I think it is a problem. Maybe there doesn't have to be an occupiable roof up there. Maybe there's enough space at grade that'll get used, and that can just be solar panels and no need for a parapet at all, and they can just be flush mounted and a fire rated roof and call it a day. Or a railing tucked in for an occupiable roof, and the solar panels can be on the side and exposed. I think we're all used to seeing solar panels just on roofs. I don't think we need to screen solar panels. But I want to give some latitude and not prescribe exactly how that solution is made, but maybe if we just make a motion to approve, I think, the general project and the general design sort of that's being proposed here, with some flexibility that they can continue refining those design features with staff. I'd feel comfortable with that. So maybe with that, I will make that motion to approve this project. I don't have the agenda number out, so I will make a motion to approve item 7-1 at 925 Adams Street with the revised conditions of approval mentioned by staff, as well as sort of direction to continue refining the sort of French doors on the ground floor, the primary entry doors, and the parapets and solar, to continue just working with staff to see if any of those can be refined per the comments that we've made.
May I make a staff suggestion for your consideration? Since I think more than one of you brought up the kind of front articulation, I know there's the window with the 4-inch recess that we figured out what that meant, but Commissioner Moman had mentioned, the potential bay projection, and if you wanted to add into that motion an addition of balconies or bay projections that meet the allowable encroachments, because that is something that if they were to add in, it would require a revised design review. So if you
absolutely
that ahead of time, that would be awesome.
I'm more than happy to add that in. I thought that was a great addition as well. Again, I don't think I'm hesitant to always do the designing on the fly, but I do think some sort of articulation like that if you guys work together with staff and it's in compliance with the objective design standards.
And for that, the other clarification I want to know, are these requirements or considerations to, if you can clarify?
I'm making the motion of it's not a requirement. It's if you guys think those were good ideas and you would like to consider refining your design as you get into construction drawings, you're welcome to do so. I think, and that was sort of the point that I made in my comments, is I think the design where we are right now, I feel like every project can always be better, but I think we're at a place where it's good enough and in compliance with our standards and our rules, and it's producing housing. So if you'd like to make it even better, you have our support to do so, but as proposed, I'm also supportive of it. So that is the long-winded motion. Hopefully it makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think none of my comments were, meant to be conditions. They are suggestions. So, and I think it's a good point. If they want to add those projections, then they should not have to come back to you to make that. So it's a good idea to add that in the comments now. Yeah. And thank you.
Was that a second to the motion, Commissioner Moman? Keep things moving. Great.
Okay, I guess I would only just want to think about combining the buildings. I don't know if that's something you would be interested or willing or think about, or I mean, that would mean you'd come back for sure, either way, if you wanted to do it. I mean, if you wanted to do it, you'd have to come back, even if we don't say you have to do it or say it's a good idea tonight, but I don't know. So that's something you would consider, or?
We have a very
Again, can you come to the podium, please?
Yeah, just please, yeah, address comments for 1 second.
In the world, I'm Bodie Burgess. I'm one of also the partners of the LC. So I think it also meets some of the competing requirements for daylighting as well for our neighbors to the north. So it's not just a big box, and because the sun is coming from the south. So I think it also from a design standpoint, it's not one big box, and so it does meet more. It's as I think one of the commissioners put it, it's a sort of a delicate addition to the neighborhood that fits both, just given the variety of different housing. So as opposed to one big box. So I think the design element does appreciate a number of those different factors. And certainly when we think about detached housing versus one big housing, I can appreciate that. Our council from various places has been that detached housing is more desirable than being part of one larger block unit. So those are just the number of considerations that we had looked at. And so this was the best middle ground to satiate all of those different desires. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. I mean, there is a way to articulate it. You could pull in those corners a little. Anyway, I'm going to drop that, and we'll move on to our motion, and let's vote. Commissioner Hudson.
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch, I imagine.
Abstain due to my absence.
Commissioner Moman.
Yes.
Commissioner Wadi.
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. So that motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. So that is planning application 23-21, 925 Adams Street has been approved. Thank you for your time and good luck with your project. All right, moving on to our next item. New business, 8-1, Planning and Zoning Commission 2023 Advisory Body Status Update.
Yes, thank you. So this year, the city has decided that instead of doing a biannual work plan for the boards and commissions, that the city council would be presented with more, they call it a status update, but I kind of think of it more as a summary of what occurred in the past year. So with that, I have attached to the memorandum I provided the draft staff report that I am hoping to submit to City Council, as well as the attachment of the summary of the meetings. And in both the staff report and the summary of the meetings that were included, areas highlighted in yellow will be finalized after this meeting. But as mentioned, you guys have done a lot, so you all deserve kudos for your energy and just for your dedication and just your time that you volunteer here, so thank you. But 23 design review applications for residential additions, 1 design review that won't be highlighted for a new 3-dwelling unit infill project, 3 use permits for commercial uses, 3 parklets for restaurants, and 2 parcel maps. Those were the project developments. And then long-range planning, as you know, you saw the housing element quite a few times and did a lot of work on that. The parking ordinance and general plan amendments that you reviewed, again, quite a few times in response to AB 2097. And I think I let you know, but the City Council did approve citywide removing any type of parking minimums, and they did approve parking maximums for non-residential uses only. And again, this does not apply in the waterfront district, but everywhere else. So the second reading is going December, on Monday, whatever that is, the 4th. So if you're interested in the second reading, it hopefully will stand consent. And in addition to that, the accessory dwelling unit, which will be going back, or I shouldn't say going back, will finally be going to City Council on December 18th for hopefully approval. And then the local hazard mitigation plan update. You did a study session of that earlier in the year. So a lot of work that you all did, and I put together a prospective upcoming work items furthering the City Council strategic plan goals, and you did receive a copy of the City Council strategic plan. And so I think a lot of our work plan is dictated to us by the development projects we receive, as well as the state laws that get passed down, keep us quite busy. But with that, I'd like to turn it to you all for any comments or additions or edits of any typos that you found. That would be happy. And then I would be looking for a vote on whatever you all decide to submit this to City Council.
Okay, I guess I'll continue sharing. Sure. Yeah. Well, first, before we open it to public comment, are there any specific questions? Or we should just open it to public comment, I think, and then we can ask our questions and all that afterwards.
So if you'd like to speak on the Planning
there's-
Commission 2023 Advisory Body Status Update, please raise your hand using the raise the hand icon.
And there's no one present in the room either, so no one here to speak. So let's start with questions, comments, discussion. Who would like to start? No?
I don't have any comments at this time.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just curious. The strategic plan objective has very broad objectives, not like specific tasks that we'll have to do. In our housing element, we have like lots of policies that would need some, rezoning and zoning changes and all that. So, and most of them, have like timeline by the end of 2025. And so just wondering like, what is the plan for those changes? Most of them would, I think, be under objective 1 listed here in goal 2.
So yes, they would be under objective 1. And the timing, that's a great question. We are moving forward kind of slowly with it. So I do believe that next year there will be items, as you mentioned, some of the rezonings perhaps, or other items that are particularly zoning related that will come to you. So we should add that in to the work plan. So thank you for that.
Okay. So would there be a work plan at all or no?
We have identified our priorities, and that went to City Council last month or the month before. So it was a list of identified priorities based on public interest during the whole housing element process, as well as those that were identified by timing as identified in the housing element, as well as those identified we found it from HCD. So in our certification letter from HCD, they provide a bulleted list, and those are the ones that they will be particularly following up on as well. So based on kind of those three, kind of the public interest, state laws, timing as identified in the housing element, and those identified by HCD, those kind of set the priorities of the numerous programs that we said we would do. So with that, obviously, we can't do all at once. So those were set into 3 tiers. I can't tell you what was in each tier off the top of my head, but it will be just starting and knocking them off. And some of the tiers were based on kind of the highest pressing in terms of interest and need, as well as kind of throwing in some low-hanging fruit that, we can get that done sooner rather than later, because we know some of them are going to be, even if they're really pressing, are going to, or have a lot of interest, are also going to, because of the interest, are going to be more contentious and might not be as simple to get through, such as
Single family.
certain tenant protections or, rent stabilization policies, or there's going to be more time involved in those.
Okay.
That's how we put that together. And if you're interested, the Royal We, meaning I will be presenting the kind of the priorities of the housing element as we identified at the RISE Commission on next Tuesday, which is the 5th. So if you have another evening that you want to hang out in this room, please join us. Yes.
Other questions, comments,
thank you. No.
observations? Or? Well, I guess, then I'll go. I guess I'm a little confused about, okay, this is supposed to replace our work plan, right? And so now, I mean, there are a number of things I would like to see us do. But then, how does that get adopted, or how is it, who then is deciding what we work on?
Well, that's.
It seems a little vague to me at this.
Well, this is a great time to bring up what you'd be interested in doing. So again, the priorities are going to be what is on our mandate. So it has to be within our mandate. So like reviewing the development projects that come through, zoning ordinance changes, if there's any general plan, specific plan amendments, any new specific plan, objective standards, like those things are going to go through this body. And then there, whatever is prioritized by council, if there's something that council is like, this is our priority for you, we will work that in as well. And then if there's other things that fall within the purview of your commission that you all are interested in and we have spare time, yes. So I think, not to say that we can do them, but I think this would be the time to have that discussion of what you're interested in so that we can try to incorporate it, again, with the assumptions that it is under your purview and that, it's furthering the goals, the goals of the city further, yeah.
Right, well, yeah, I guess the way I read the strategic plan is that we can pick various pieces from many different parts of it that do apply to what we do here. So, looking at what I would like to see us work on, my main focus has been supporting transit-oriented development and also housing. So the way those two go together is really important to me. And we've mentioned it a few times, the Transportation Demand Management Program. I think we've discussed that as something we wanted to work on, but we didn't have time to do it in the brief or in the discussion of the parking because that was kind of a big enough issue all by itself. And I think from what I saw from council, they also want to see it improved and changed because there's not much to it. It's kind of vague, could be interpreted different ways. They had a long discussion about that. So I would think that would be something very good for us to work on, and that it should apply citywide and not just the San Pablo specific plan as we kind of adopted it or added it. That's one thing, and then in support of transit-oriented design, the other thing, and we talked a little bit about it during the vehicle parking, was bicycle parking, because the way I see it, our bike parking ordinance is really weak, really inadequate, especially if we're trying to support transit-oriented development, and especially in new housing projects. And also very weak when it comes to public events. Endless frustration for me watching Foodie Land backslide every time. They literally could have just provided like space for 5 bikes and they would have complied with the ordinance. And that's not really where I see the intent should be. I think it's promoting alternatives to car use, alternatives to vehicle miles traveled. So those two things are part of it. And then in terms of supporting housing, I think it's part, it was also brought up a lot during the San Pablo specific plan, San Pablo Avenue specific plan, was that we should be extending greater housing or making housing easier in other parts of the city, not just San Pablo Avenue corridor. And to that end, I think a Solano Avenue specific plan would be great, but it would be it could be just looking at the zoning for the whole city. If that has to be done as part of a general plan, it's a big question, but, I think we should be looking at R2, R3. For example, like the height limits I saw tonight are 35 feet for R3 right next to San Pablo Avenue, which is, can go up to 8 stories, so we're limiting it to 3 stories, but I think we can start tiering it a little more towards the higher density zones. So I would like to see us looking at zoning upgrades for other parts of the city, and I think that was brought up, you know, in terms of equity, and also in the housing element, that we're not supposed to just concentrate development in one part of the city on San Pablo Avenue. And a few other things. Ballot measures. You know, we have this potential big project or big thing at the waterfront if the racetrack, if and when the racetrack closes, and we're very limited in what can happen there by Measure C. In fact, there's very little that can happen, and if increasing revenue is a concern of the council, then Measure C is an obstacle to doing any kind of development there that will bring in any revenue. So it's got to be revised by ballot measure. So that was one thing. And then Measure K, I don't know, it just seems to also be a ballot measure that keeps being put off into the future. So I'm wondering if that is, I mean, I don't know if that's some part of our work plan or something we would have input on, how it's written or what we're looking for. Those two things would be important for me. And then, like you said, implementing the housing measure, or housing element is very important, but I think that's part of upzoning and reducing other obstacles. And to that end, I would suggest we review FAR and decide why we need it, if we need it, or eliminate it, because in a lot of jurisdictions, we don't have to deal with it. Where I work, we don't have to deal with that. And it is literally restraining the square footage within the building envelopes. You can't build all the way out to the building envelope. So to me, it is a literal obstacle to housing production or creation. And then the other thing that Commissioner Waddy mentioned was just incremental edits to some of the existing things, like our San Pablo Avenue, or the objective standards, I guess we could review at some point. But and that's it. But yeah, the main things for me would be zoning, EDM, and bike parking, I think. I'm especially keen on the bike parking because that, to me, is part and parcel of getting people out of their cars and getting more people on the streets and reducing our greenhouse gas production, et cetera, et cetera. So that, to me, that it applies to the climate action plan, transportation plans, and the also part of the housing plan. So I think it kind of combines a lot of things. Same with the TDM. So, anyone else have thoughts or comments, or Commissioner Pilch?
Sure. So your comments spur me to give a little, to comment as well. So my understanding is that staff transitioned from work plans to this status update. And it seems to be that that means that we do not have a formal mechanism anymore to make our request known formally to the city council, through a process. That's my understanding. So I would suggest that, and I agree, by the way, with all your comments about priorities that we should have. I suggest that you bring these to your appointing council member and also directly to the city council, because it seems like the mechanism has gone away, as far as I can tell. And I've been consulting with council members about this, and it seems to be what has happened. So it's a little bit, I don't like it. I'll say that. So that's my suggested mitigation, is to go directly to your council members, as well as advocating here.
Either.
Well, I'll just say that the comments that you've made, I will incorporate into this very brief report to say that at the commission, this was, expressed that this would, so it's one little paragraph, and so I will add it to the report, and you can, pursue other methods.
And to be very clear, I'm not criticizing present staff at all, just commenting on what I see has happened. So.
Any other comments or feedback? Oh, yeah, go ahead, sorry. Commissioner.
Your list was very stimulating for me to think about, and I think safe bike parking is what you mean, because there's so many bikes that are stolen, and they're parked, and yeah. So we want to encourage more bike riding. We have to have safe bike parking. So I don't know how much we interface with that, or is that transportation, but I also think we need to, if we're any influence at all, I've never been doing this before, this is my first year, so excuse me, reviving Solano Avenue. It seems to be sadly losing more storefronts. Looking on Solano, San Pablo, walking here from my house, I also noticed on San Pablo a lot of businesses. A lot of that's COVID fallout, but some of it may not be. I'm not sure what we can do to encourage. Whether we have a say in that, I don't know. I just like to put it out there. I agree the waterfront is another area of possible development. How much we have say in that is a good question as well. I guess those are the main things. Again, it may not be in our scope at all, but I think drought-tolerant front yards. The yards around here look really bad and ratty. It's not necessary. People can put in things that are drought-tolerant. It doesn't have to be grass. But it really looks, it brings the neighborhood down in terms of its appearance. How do we influence that? Sorry, that's off topic. I'm sorry, but yep. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Just to respond to that last point, I think that's also something that our Climate Action Committee would be interested in studying, talking about, or maybe they've already suggested some things in that vein. So I would imagine, but I don't know. I don't follow that body, but that seems like it would be in their purview.
Yeah, that also reminds me of the other thing that I've thought about a fair amount in the past is actually adopting green building standards that are much more comprehensive and rigorous than what we have at the moment, because the moment I think is just like a simple build it green checklist, which is not very, doesn't do much. I mean, there are a lot of other programs, like I'm sure Commissioner Moman is familiar with them, and Commissioner Waddy also, the like LEED or even passive house standards. There's lots of ways we could improve our buildings and get much more energy efficient, safer, healthier buildings, and adopting green building standards is one way to do that.
Sounds like you're talking about REACH codes.
Yes, in a way. I mean, it's right, and I'm sure the Climate Action Committee has considered these or talked about these before, but could be something we did in conjunction with the Climate Action Committee. And that brings me to my question. It's like, this does seem quite vague to me, what we're embarking on. So then, like, who decides how? I mean, partly there's staff limitations. It goes to council. Does something come back to us? Or, I mean, we're not going to have a formal work plan, so do we have an informal work plan? What is it going to be?
This is new, so I don't know if you have more information than I have.
I don't have any more information. I can respond just based on my experience. I think that the work plans that we have had over the last decade or so have been very detailed, and we get through a small portion of most of them. So while it's a nice list and we go to that and like, are we forgetting anything? We're in no way getting all the way through it. And so I think that's where this is direction that comes from the city manager, who in the course of her work with council members, this is something that she created. I think the idea here was to get everybody, all of us, focused back on the council's strategic plan. And presumably they thought through all these things when they were creating that strategic plan and getting us focused on doing those things first. As staff, to you, this commission, we're happy to work on all those things that you listed. We can probably get like 3 or 4 of them done, if we're lucky, in a year. But we're happy to try to pursue those and fit them into your agendas as best we can. And we can talk about, it's probably a different agenda item and probably something that we'd want to give some thought to anyhow. You know, what would be our priorities? What do we see being feasible to accomplish? If you recall, the housing element, I think, had something like 60 programs and with a clock running. So that's the big beast that we have to deal with, and then we'll fit in these other things as we can.
And that's where I'm going to say I think your 3 to 4 is overly ambitious, not realistic.
Well, maybe
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think him saying we can get 3 or 4 of these done is not realistic at all. Maybe 1. But I'm not.
1 or 2.
I mean, we have the housing element. We're still getting applications in that we have to process, and I'm not sure how many new ordinance we have to. I think we're pretty okay with the new slew of laws that have passed for this year. But.
Well, and I was just going to chime in on that as somebody who sits in your seat in a different place. This year's, housing element compliance this round is a whole different animal than it's ever been in years past. And so this is just a different element, and the clocks are tight and the clocks are being watched, and that has to be the #1 priority. And there's a lot more happening. There's many more items than I'm sure you guys have ever had in years past, and the state laws aren't slowing down. There were new ones having to do with ADUs even this last year. They're going to keep coming, and we're going to have to keep addressing those. And so I also don't want us to have false expectations of what's going to happen. And hopefully there are opportunities, and I think having this list, sort of this wish list, is great, because when opportunities present themselves, and if it's appropriate, maybe we can add on an FAR amendment, or maybe we can add on sort of an acknowledgement of some of these other things that we're trying to deal with, but there may not be, I do hear you, there may not be an opportunity to have standalone discussions and efforts to tackle these individually. So I'm empathetic to at least the first few years of housing element compliance.
I would have, and to top that off, the thing that several of you mentioned is the waterfront. That is something that we're giving a lot of thought to. That is going to be, I think, a very, very significant work item over the next decade, realistically, and probably be, even though that's not anywhere, that's not in the council's strategic plan, I think that is going to become a big work item. And this commission will be at the center of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I agree with Planning Manager Mendez and Member Wadi about the fact there's a lot to do, and the game has changed. And one of the things that, also that one of the things that I understood was that council was going to do was prioritize. So prioritizing all the items that we might need or want to do, I think, makes a lot of sense. To Commissioner Wadi's point, what are the things where the clock is ticking? Those have to be done. And then what else can we fit in, and what is our priority of those other things, and what's a nice to have and what's a must have. And I'll also say that it is, I think, all the bodies, and including the council, recognize that they have made large lists in the past, which have been mostly fiction in terms of what can be accomplished. So paring things down probably is a good thing as well. But I think we also should discuss what we need, and that's not to say we can't discuss what we need and what we would like to have as well. So I'm sorry, Commissioner Moment, didn't mean to cut you off.
I just had a question related to the waterfront. So you were referring to Golden Gate Fields, right?
Excuse me?
When you talked about waterfront, you were referring to Golden Gates Field, right?
Golden Gate Fields?
Yeah, the Golden Gate Fields in particular. That is where we end up going with it, who knows, and that's a policy decision. But my guess is that we will have to take a hard look at putting a ballot measure before the voters in the next few years. In order to do that, we've got to figure out some of those policy objectives and goals, as well as some of the constraints, the realities of that particular piece of property. Got a lot of them.
Right, yeah. So I had a question related to that, like since that property is divided between two cities, how are we going to handle that? Like, ideally there has to be like a one unified vision, but if, certain measures that city, Albany has in practice,
That is part of the problem.
Exactly. So is there any like thought on the mechanism to deal with that?
Nothing is going on in any formal way. You'll be the first to hear about that if and when, but it's certainly something that we think about. And there are different mechanisms of cities working together on properties like that, but they're complicated and they're political.
Right, of course, yeah.
It's going to take a little while to work through all those issues and agree on a mechanism to sort that out. You're absolutely right. 100 acres are in Albany and 30 or so acres are in Berkeley. The infrastructure crosses over the city limit.
Right,
It's just a
yeah.
mess.
Yes, thank you. I was instructed that you all, as a commission, need a vote to pass on this report. And I'm going to add in the ideas that were raised this evening. I shouldn't say ideas, but kind of the what you'd like to work on as well. I'll add that in. And with that, I also just wanted to, I don't know if it was Commissioner Waddy or who said that when we do bring things forward, we will try to, we may maybe not be able to do a whole FAR section, but if we could add it into some of our housing element rezoning, I think that's going to be our most realistic way of trying to address most, more of these than less of these. So yeah, it's good to have them vocalized. So thank you.
At least have some list of things that we want to look at, and how they're going to prioritize is another question.
Right.
Whole discussion there about how to prioritize.
Could I ask a couple?
Council will give us some direction.
Yeah.
Could I ask a couple of questions?
Sure. Go ahead.
I noticed in the housing element, we had 1,114 more units to stuff into Albany by 2031. And how far along are we on that?
3.
No.
I don't know the numbers. We have been, we are building a lot of ADUs. There's a lot of ADU construction. I don't have the numbers. That will be another thing, working on the annual progress report that we have to submit to HCD every year. So that will be, is it due in April?
April 1st, April.
Yeah, so we'll have more definitive numbers.
They don't count toward those units, do they?
They do. ADUs, there's
Awesome.
a separate
Okay.
section for, yes.
Okay.
So.
And where does one find the local hazard mitigation report or update that we had?
You've seen the most recent public draft. That was 6 months ago or so.
Not sure.
It was in February.
Oh, you may not have been on the commission quite then.
I saw it in February, so I don't know.
So that is the most recent.
And so was it finalized? Because we gave input. No, it hasn't been finalized.
We have received some feedback from the state, and we're going to be, they kind of changed the guidelines in the middle of the preparation of the document, so we're kind of having to take a step backwards
Oh,
to meet their new requirements. It's not a step backwards, but just slowing down to meet their new requirements.
see, are you fully staffed by now?
No,
Oh, darn, okay.
we're down a couple of people.
Still,
We're working on that.
okay.
I'm sorry, I missed what you have to go back to HCD for.
Oh, we have to, well, for HCD, we do an annual report, basically an accounting of all the housing units that are approved by this commission, that receive building permits, and that are constructed.
Oh, it sounded like there was something that wasn't quite approved yet.
This is the local hazard mitigation plan?
Okay, thank you.
That's what was asking about the local hazard mitigation plan. You saw a draft a number of months ago. We've got feedback, and the guidelines have changed, so we're spending some more time editing that. And we just have to do more analysis of each potential hazard.
Got it.
So
Okay.
Will we see that again?
you'll see it before it's adopted. You have to see it. And then that triggers, which reminds me, it triggers a general plan amendment that you'll have to approve as well.
Well, I was just going to move. Yeah, I was going to move that we approve the status report with additions by staff based on comments by the commission.
Second. Aye.
Yes.
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 My goodness. Happy holidays. You know,
Yes. Exactly.
okay.